To the Upgrade Hotel News Now EMEA podcast. Welcome. It's great to have you with us. I'm Terence Baker, HNN's news editor for Europe, Middle East and Africa. As always, I'm ably assisted by producer Patrick Skillicorn. In this month's edition of the EMEA podcast, we're going to look at AI, artificial intelligence. So today, I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Edwards, CEO of business advisory Hospitality Technology Advisory. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Terence. Lovely to be here.
AI, I'm not an expert. We're hoping you can give our readers an insight in what's happening. I see from your website that HTA is concerned with, and I quote, aligning the correct technology resources with organisations for the effective deployment of strategies, systems and people. That sounds absolutely wonderful. Give us a little bit of spiel about what you do, and then we'll get on to some meatier subjects.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so HTA is relatively newly formed, but it's formed out of many years of consulting within the sector, particularly around technology. I guess the slight difference here is that we're now really focusing on starting with the strategy. So, and when we talk about strategy, we're not just talking technology strategy, which most technology consultants talk about. We're really looking at business strategy first. To really understand that, so that we can then help organisations truly align their technology strategy to it. And I guess we go beyond traditional, looking at requirements and finding out how technology is going to fit, more to understanding how it's going to make a difference. What is the key performance indicator that it's going to drive? Are you driving revenue? Are you reducing costs, guest experience? And actually putting in mechanisms to manage and maintain it so you actually get that return on investment, which is so often, we talk about failed projects within IT, and it's so common because actually it's that business change that needs to be happening to be able to facilitate the impact on the KPI.
We're talking about hotels. Hoteliers are generally accused of being behind the curve on anything technology as well. We hear time and time again, and this is the purest sense of this, I imagine, that you rock up to a check-in and say, give them a passport, and they say, welcome, Mr. Edwards, have you been here before? And you probably stay there 3 days every week for the last 3 years. That's kind of a simple thing. I mean, of course, as you mentioned, there's wonderful things we can do in terms of tweaking RevPAR, performance, occupancy, etc., to help the top line, help the bottom line. Where do you see AI and technology better allowing hoteliers to both understand the guest and understand their business?
Yeah, I think it's a real common misconception, I guess, in terms of that hoteliers are behind the curve. They are in some respects, but it really comes down to basics of foundations of technology. It's ensuring that actually you've got all of your data in the right place, that you've got connectivity between systems, and a lot of the negativity is aimed at the actual hoteliers, but in most cases it's the technology providers that are so far behind.
So we're not to blame?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I think that we're almost hamstrung with the tools that we're given. What we have seen over the past 10 years is some real evolution in that space, particularly with PMS vendors. But, there's always been this sort of closed mentality when it comes to data. Everyone tries to be, the central point for the guest. And unless, that mentality shifts, then it's very difficult to harmonize your data into a single place. And that's the only way that you're truly going to get recognition. We recently worked with, an ultra-luxury group about, just looking at who needs to access what data when. There's always this thing of, right data, right place, right time. I actually think it goes way beyond that when we talk about hospitality. It's about, right data to the right people, but in the right application. Because we look at waiting staff. How are we giving them information about the preferences, or that Mr. Edwards likes still water or a cappuccino? We need to think beyond, but part of that comes down to having data in a central place and then being able to seamlessly connect it to the systems that count.
And there should be no difference between the different segmentation in the hotel industry, the budget hotels, economy on one side, luxury on the other. There shouldn't be any difference, really. It's just how you, as you say, data in, data out, and
yeah, it's really about understanding the use case of the data, and that's probably where hoteliers are guilty in terms of technology projects, where they've not necessarily understood what the business case was. There's a lot of vanity projects out there when it comes to AI in particular, and I think it's probably a good point to sort of like demystify some of what AI actually means.
I'd love to hear that.
So I sort of see it on two levels, really. We have generative AI and we have analytical AI, and it's fairly self-explanatory. And this is how I explain to sort of senior leadership teams. When we look at the hotel industry, we already have got huge experience of working with analytical AI. Things like STR reports, things like revenue management systems. We're using all this data to analyze what rate we should be selling at the right time. So, in some respects, this is nothing new. However, the advancement of what you can do now with analytics is much greater. And once you sort of go into more the operational side of the business, you start thinking about how you can bring all of your data into a single place about your guests. You can start predicting guest behavior, or certainly trying to influence guest behavior through through sort of actions that they take. And that's probably the next evolution. But again, it comes back down to that foundations of where is your data and what is the business case? What are you trying to achieve?
Thank you for a plug for STR. That's our parent company. I have to probably give that admission. Thank you for that. Hotels, hoteliers, hotel brands, companies, they're probably at different stages of their journey through AI. If you're panicking at the news you're hearing, and there's a lot in the last couple of days, probably every day, what should hoteliers be thinking now if they're not really too far along on this journey?
I think there's always this misconception that everybody else around you is so far ahead, and the reality is that most people have got exactly the same challenges when it comes to that centralization of data. For example, it's the biggest issue in the whole industry is centralization of data, and so I don't think anybody's necessarily further along than others. I think there's maybe isolated point projects where they may have something, but again, it comes back down to business case. And we're getting so many questions from executive teams about are we truly harnessing the power of AI? And once you start breaking it down, you make them understand how much they are actually using. Then I think there's sort of a calming of that. But again, every single point comes back down to what's the business case? What's the driver behind it? If you look back in time at sort of the early adoption of internet, and internet booking, hotels largely didn't really understand what the use case was going to be, whereas OTAs crashed the party and took all the business. Is there a danger of happening with AI? I think it all comes back down to understanding how it's going to fit into your business and what that journey is. As you say, it's such a fast-moving pace, particularly the generative AI side of things, and that's where I believe that there's a lot of vanity. I don't believe there's a lot of solidity in terms of actual propositions that are going to truly make a difference, other than minor gains in productivity. And so I think that part of it is being aware, but it's not necessarily committing full into everything AI. Let's keep a focus on what our product is, which is hospitality, which largely is driven around people. If you think about what experiences you've had in hotels over the past amount of decades, most will come down to the fact that someone did recognise you at front desk. Often it's just down to the ability of the staff.
It is, isn't it? And this is one of the arguments you hear all the time. It's a people business, and it should be, and it always will be. The AI, the technology, some people feel that that's somehow degrading the experience, the business? I mean, what is it? I mean, we'll get onto the privacy concerns and some of the working staff day by day considerations around AI and new technology. Can it be detrimental to the hoteliers, or it should all be behind the scenes and the guest doesn't see it?
No, I think there's a real danger that there's dilution of brand value and brand equity, particularly when it comes to generative. I think marketing teams in particular are looking at how they can use AI to generate content, or how we can use it in the guest journey to automate responses to guests through chatbots. And sometimes what we end up doing is creating this greater level of friction within a chatbot of not replying in context. It sort of depends where your hotel or brand sits within the chain in terms of, is it budget or is it ultra luxury? But there is a real danger of dilution. I recently attended a dinner which was around AI, and there was from all different industries. There were people there from government, there was people there from manufacturing, people like Dyson and finance people, houses. And there was a really good point that was raised about generative AI that, in the public domain, 50% of stuff which is on the internet is used to feed, everything, all these AI models. Over half of that is incorrect. So on the basis of that, we keep on generating more content. We have this ever-decreasing circle of truth. And so generative AI in public domain is probably as good as it's ever going to get. And that's a real worry. It's as more AI starts to create more AI. And
I want to get onto this subject in a couple of minutes because it fascinates me. We've seen geopolitics change in the last month and a half very rapidly. We knew it would. There seems to be, out of the United States, maybe more onus on AI and certain technologies coming from the real deputy president, vice president, sorry, that's the term, Mr. Musk. But on the other side, the ESG, which I imagine is a lot of that information is fueled by AI and systems around that, seems to be perhaps less on the front burner in the US. Have you got a crystal ball about how this is going to happen? I mean, my idea is that the finance will rule the roost. If you want a loan on a property, you might not be able to get one. You may not be able to get debt because you don't have ESG and AI or whatever it might be in place. You have to tick the boxes, and then you can get to the next stage and develop, and then get the guests in, etc., etc. I'm not sure how it all plays out. Otherwise, I'd be with my own spade somewhere doing a hotel. But are you seeing trouble looming in this?
I think on a much bigger geopolitical level, there is huge confusion over what the future holds. And I think if we look at the situation in the US, it's a minefield. There was a really interesting opinion article within the FT at the weekend, where they talk about AI being almost the downfall of the US, because they've put so much focus into it that the rest of the world actually is just focusing on the business as usual. Not that they're detracting away from aspects of AI, but they've not gone as all in as what the US. I think the influence of Musk is something to watch. But how much of an impact it will have on our sector, I really don't know. From an ESG point of view, I don't necessarily agree that it's taken as much of a backseat. I think it's probably getting sort of clouded out with the noise of AI more than anything else. Certainly from the hotel groups that we're working with, we get to work with both hotel owners and operators, so we see both sides of the fence. And ESG is still very, very high on the agenda, and it's a driving force through. How the US plays out, who knows? But certainly ESG is still front and centre in most organisations. I
was at a conference a couple of days ago, the hotel investment, it was called Hyde, and the hoteliers there in London several of them said, you have to make a division between the signals and the noise. Yeah. And we've probably heard this before in many occasions, but again, that's coming out as a statement. Many are saying that you've got to see your brand strategy. put it in place, get the tools you need, have a concept of where you want to be, what guests you want, target market, etc., and go for that, and not be bogged down with inevitable press headlines.
Yeah, and I think if I'm old enough to have gone through the whole internet .com boom, and I think we'll see something.
Me too, Kevin.
I think we'll see something similar within the AI space, where there is so many new ventures coming to market that and so many business models being entirely dependent on organisations which we're not sure of their financial status or stability long term. Then I think that we'll see a point of crash. Without doubt, AI is here to stay. That's a given. It's going to be part of our nature. However, I do feel that there is going to be a large crash within it, and then we'll see the real business use cases come forward.
It's fascinating. I mean, many years ago, I had a lunch. I lived in New York City for many years, and there was 20 people there, and I may have known 3 or 4. And when the bill came, someone picked it up, and we said, "Well, can we pay our bit or whatever?" And somebody said, "No." The person at the end of the table I hadn't spoken to paid for it all, and he or she was a .com millionaire. Yeah. I always wondered what happened to that person, whether that wealth lasted a week and a half or who knows. I mean, your point's very well taken. I saw yesterday on the news that a major global legal firm announced that it was banning or pulling back on the use of AI for its budding lawyers or its admin staff. Immediately comes to my mind that famous case, Hinds versus Berry. I don't remember 1970, where Lord Denning started off by saying it was April the 19th, 1934. It was Bluebell time in Kent. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The reason I remember that is because April 19th is my father's birthday. He would have been 30 on that very day. Anyway, they pluck those kind of things out in AI, which is effortlessly can do that.
Yes.
If you want to have a summation of a legal case and you're not quite sure of the law or the previous cases relating to what you're summing up, it's instant. You can do it. But they're pulling back on that. Is that because there's a fear that we'll lose the gatekeepers, that it'll become too easy, that we won't have critical thinking? And this relates to hoteliers, obviously, in their day-to-day. Any business, it will relate to their day-to-day thinking. What is the notion around trying to pull back on some of that use?
Yeah, I think that's a very common concern, particularly with executive teams. Is there's a fear that you'll start to see employees no longer responding to emails, and it will be almost generated for them, and just you'll be in this sort of bot versus bot conversation where actually humans never actually involved. And I think that if you look at many different things, you've got to be concerned with actually keeping that sort of, if you like, human touch on things. We're in the hospitality business at the end of the day. We need to use technology to our advantage. Comes back to business case.
And lastly, Kevin, what should hoteliers be doing now? It's a simple question, probably a big answer, but what would you say, okay, you need this in place, you've got to be a bit careful of this, but you need this?
Do you know what, more on, like I said at the very top of the conversation, you have to look at ensuring that you've got your data in an organised fashion in a central place. You've got the connectivity to all of your systems to be able to distribute that data out. The foundations are absolutely critical in all of this.
And the future is AI is going to be here for forever.
Yeah, without a doubt, it will evolve and it will change. And I think it's a really exciting generation that we're going to live in.
Kevin Edwards, CEO, Hospitality Technology Advisory. I really appreciate your time here. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terence.
So, what else has been in Hotel News Now's web pages over the last month or so? Here are a couple stories you might want to catch up with at www.hotelnewsnow.com. So, 2 refinancing packages and 2 hotel industry conferences. The first refinancing, Zetland Capital via Bank Leumi refinanced 2 UK Marriott hotels for 70 million. That was for 2 hotels in Edinburgh and Manchester, I believe. But then came a larger package in London. Actually, this package was the largest refinancing package since the end of the pandemic. 300 plus million for the Bowltree Hotel just behind Oxford Street in London's Marylebone neighbourhood. As I say, the largest deal since the end of COVID-19. Shiva Hotels, the owner and operator there. 2 conferences I mentioned. The first was in Madrid, the Atlantic Ocean Hotel Investors Summit, very well attended, and we have lots of Africa content there. And the second one in London, the inaugural Hotel Industry Development event. Andrew Sangster, our friend Hotel Analyst, hosted that, and also included Simon Allison from Hoftel, who hosts AOHIS. So that's the whole hotel world collaborating as one happy family. The other day, IHG announced its full year 2024 results, and also that for $116 million, 110 million euros, they bought the Ruby Hotels brand from Munich, Germany. 20 hotels in operation and 11 in the pipeline, including 1 announced last week in Copenhagen. That's the news. As always, every other Thursday, H&N publishes an EMEA newsletter with exclusive articles, opinion, news and comments from the entire region. Go to hotelnewsnow.com to sign up. Scroll down the left-hand side, you know the drill. Buy the picture of Berlin Cathedral and please sign up and become a reader of that newsletter. We'd very much like to have you along with us. So that's all that's left for me to say is thank you for listening, and I hope you'll tune in next time. This is The Upgrade, the Hotel News Now EMEA podcast, produced by Patrick Skillicorn. Additional material and lots of data provided by STR co-star William Anns. And once again, thank you to our guest, Kevin Edwards. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm STR's Isaac Colazo.
And I'm co-star's Jan Freitag, and together we are the data geeks behind Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network.
Every month, we bring you a fresh take on the latest hotel data, insight into the travel trends behind that performance, and the big picture topics you should be thinking about.
And we don't mind getting into good-natured disagreements from time to time. Hey, when Isaac and I start talking about data together, anything can happen, and it usually does.
Find us on hotelnewsnow.com and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you like to listen. Search for Hotel News Now, and thank you for listening.